Hello, everyone, and welcome to this latest podcast from the Light Review. And we're talking again with my friend Steve Saville from Clevertronics. Now, if you're taking these in order, you will know that the last time we spoke, a couple of months back now, we were talking about maybe trying to set out, we were calling it a worksheet, but some way of being able to help with the process of arriving at an emergency lighting system design. So here we are. Steve is in the frame for this. We've got a feeling it's not a tick box exercise, don't we, Steve?
Absolutely, because it's quite fluid depending on how the project arrives on your desk, what elements you've been asked to look at, what stage the project's at when you've been approached to do a scheme or design.
Okay, so what we've decided is that I'm going to sit here slack-jawed, knowing nothing, which is not difficult for me. The brief we've given to Steve is that here am I am probably a facilities manager of a large commercial building. My managing director, who's obviously got finger on the pulse, has been watching our podcasts and has come to me and said, what do you know about the emergency lighting? Because you are the responsible person. And I've just gone, oh, I didn't realize that. Well, you know now, but I don't actually know anything. So I've just rung up Steve and I said, Steve, you need to help me here because we've got a big refurbishment coming up. It's a big building and this is a big project. And it looks as if anybody gets their collar felt, it's going to be me. And I don't feel comfortable with that. So please, please, please tell me what I need to know.
Okay.
Go on.
So, yeah, I mean, this is an important topic. So I'm glad that we're at least trying to approach it and cover it the best way we can. It's very, very fluid and people will have different opinions on how they approach things. But it's great that we come down to the fact that somebody ultimately will be responsible for fire safety. Somebody will be responsible for emergency lighting as part of the solution for that building. And all the standards and all the guides that we read will all cover one topic. They talk about what's required in typical areas, but the key topic is consultation. So I think that emergency lighting, designing a scheme for any building can be actually quite simple to do. If you've got the relevant guidance documents in place, you can say, is it this type of room? Tick it off. Is it that type of room? Tick it off. Oh, we need something in here. That element is actually quite easy and simple to do. Simple is probably going a stretch too far and probably detracting away from the skills and the experience that competent designers have. But I think the key bit is to put together a design that is compliant, that covers the responsible person, their responsibilities, and ensuring the building is compliant. The key bit is making sure you've got certain pieces of information. So there is a level of skill. I was probably being unkind saying it's quite simple to put a design together. But I think the key skill is managing the creation, if you like, of a design. So it's managing all the key stakeholders and the input they have in that consultation process to make sure that you arrive at a scheme that is not only compliant as a blank design on a drawing, but compliant for the building's use. So I would say, if you look at, say, BS 5266, it gives a list of sort of people you might want to speak to. So that could be a building owner, it could be an occupier, it could be a fire safety engineer, a fire risk assessor, it could be an architect, a lighting engineer. All those people could have an influence or have information that can guide you to create a design. On your own, we know far too well that quite often emergency lighting's left till the last minute, and then people will throw a design across and say, hey John, can you just do your scheme here, because I need to make sure I'm compliant, and it's something we haven't really done. Now we've done the majority of the building and I need it back this week really, because we're on with the build, you know, with the construction is taking place and this sort of thing's happening. So we can take a very basic design, or almost not quite a blank drawing, but a quite sparse drawing, and look at that with the dimensions on there, and we could probably do around 70 or 80% of what's needed to give a preliminary design and say, okay, looking at the information I have, I've done this. Okay, but then we need to be proactive. A lot of companies hide behind the caveats they put on these designs. So they say, well, I don't have all the information, so I'll do a design, send it back and say, given the information that we have at this time, this design is compliant to 5266 or yada yada. You know, they will put that information. They will cover themselves because they know they don't have that information. But a good design engineer would then say, okay, I've done that. I don't have all the information. Rather than stick a caveat there, I'll pick up the phone. I will speak to this responsible person, the person who's contacted me and asked me to do it, and say, okay, I've done this. I've covered just about all the basic areas, but there are lots of rooms in here that don't have any names. You know, they're less than 60 meters squared. So ordinarily, unless there's, a room within a room, which is the latest changes to 5266, or unless there's an escape route running through there, ordinarily you might not need emergency lighting in that area, but the room's not labeled. So you need consultation. What is this building? What's it being used for? Could there be other hazards in there that might require emergency lighting? Maybe, you know, that's outside the very basic scope of 5266, because 5266 will state that if there's a risk in that area, as part of the risk assessment, you may need emergency lighting in there. So I don't know, it could be, sorry, John, go on.
No, that's okay. I'm just thinking, here am I in my role of facilities manager, and you've just gone risk assessment. That's me, isn't it? Because if I'm the only one in this whole party that you're putting together who actually knows the way the building works.
Absolutely, and that's why consultation is critical. You can't just work from blank drawings or basic drawings, and a responsible person might not have the full skill set to be competent to do that, and they don't particularly need it as long as they employ people who are competent to do to finish those particular roles. So if they're not competent to do a fire safety risk assessment, employ somebody who is, you know, and have that information to hand, have that discussion. Again, it's back through to consultation. So it may be that they're looking at this particular room and there may be some machinery in there. They might need to speak to the manufacturer and say, what's your recommendation in an emergency condition? If somebody's operating this machine and they lose power to the mains lighting, what would your recommendation be to the light levels required in here to allow the operator to switch that machine off safely and then evacuate from that building? So they may need to speak to other people. So again, it's coming back to this whole sort of umbrella of consultation. It may be fairly basic. The majority of buildings we do designs for do tend to be basic, but there are some tricky areas. And if you don't ask those questions and reinforce the consultation, then you'll never actually know what the answer is.
Right. Okay. I think looking at that as in my facilities manager role, I get the picture that I like the idea that whilst I'm responsible, I do not need to be competent. I think that's actually very, very important. But I'm also conscious that possibly for the first time in my working life, I am expected to give information to somebody else, and I can't just give them the plan and say, "Can you do that?"
Yeah, absolutely. Because it may be that when you as a designer say, "Okay, I need more information," the competent person, the responsible person you speak to doesn't have the answers, but they may be able to put you into contact with the people who do, and that's critical. You know, and that again, depending on where you are on a project, can be absolutely anybody who's got input, a stakeholder in the fire safety of that building, whether it's architect, whether it's a designer, whether it's an occupier in that room. So the responsible person may not be somebody who's using that area, but they'll need to communicate with those people to see how they're using that area.
Right. I can see that the people who I'm going to appoint to do this work for me are then going to come back with a list of questions, aren't they?
Absolutely. So at the end of the day, we've been talking about consultation to try and become or have a compliant scheme. So you probably sit there and say, okay, well, I understand that now. I get the message. So why do we need this? So it's to highlight areas of the building that need coverage. So it's again taking it back to the basics of say 5266. So the escape routes. Usually you can work out where the escape routes are, but I've had a design recently where I've been given this and we've gone, okay, we're taking a guess. This is escape route. This is this. Put some exit signs. Through consultation, the client gives me the drawings back, and the exit signs are crossed out in these areas. And I say, okay, I picked up the phone. I need to understand these areas, and saying, oh well, actually, the room layout's changed since those drawings. So that happens quite often. Drawings, you're given out older versions of drawings and the changes have been made. And they say, there isn't actually an escape route through there anymore. That door's been blocked off, and those two rooms, which were previously smaller than 60 meters squared with no other risk associated or internal rooms, and now a larger room and require it. So consultation helps, throwing drawings and designs back and saying, this is what I've done based on here. I don't know where. So basically consultation to find out, where's the fire panel? That's not on this drawing. So I need to illuminate the fire panel, to 15 looks across the face of the fire panel. There's no firefighting equipment being shown on here. There's in the first aid room, there doesn't show us where the working plane is. So how do I ensure I get the right light levels there? Then it's okay covering yourself with a caveat and saying we haven't got the information, but maybe we should pick up the phone and ask for that information.
So I need to. Well, there's a couple of things sort of floating up here. One, I hadn't much thought about extinguishers, other than I make sure that no one's using them to prop open a door.
Yeah, well, that's usually the case.
What you're telling me that needs to be part of the scheme.
Yeah, so when you're looking at firefighting equipment or fire control equipment, call points and things like that, even electrically or electronically locked doors. So we won't know from looking at design if somebody needs a fob or something to get through a door to get into there. But if there is electronically locked doors and there's a loss of power for the mains luminaires, then people need to be able to see the release mechanisms to get out the door. And you need 5 looks on them as well. But ordinarily, they're not going to be on every design or drawing that you get across your desk to say, can you do me a quick design for that? So it's, again, how are those rooms being used? Is there electrical or electronically locked doors? Is the firefighting equipment in there? In the first aid room, where is the working plane? Where, in a treatment room, where's the treatment bed or chair? Where is the area we're trying to cover? So
in my role, I might even be needing to go to departmental heads to say, you need to explain to me how that door opens.
Yeah, quite possibly. Because if nobody tells you, then you make an assumption that that's just a normal door that somebody will open like they would any other door to move through the escape route. But what happens in real life is you get to that door and it's actually locked, because you've only lost power to the mains luminaires, not power to the site. So the locking mechanism is still there and needs to be operated to release to get that door. So you can imagine people trying to evacuate, a number of people. If you can't work that lock, they've gone down a dead end. They've gone down to a dead end, so a cul-de-sac, and they're saying, right, well, and there could be a pressure of people behind you, depending on what scenario you're evacuating from. There could be pressure of people behind you trying to get through that same door. If that door opens towards you or something like that, then there's other things to consider. So there's blank drawings are good for, say, 70 or 80% of the design, a preliminary design, but consultation is key for compliance. How do you use that door? How's it locked? How many people are going to be in that area?
Yeah, I tell you, you've also raised that subject of what actually goes on in the room. Now, the obvious scary ones is rotating machinery, which not many buildings are likely to have.
Or the standard state, they tend to love the use of the word acid bath because they're everywhere, aren't they? There's always an acid bath every room you go in. But you're right, yeah.
But you might have, but if you're in an educational building, there might be chemicals floating around in laboratories and stuff like that. If you're in a care home or in a hospital, or any kind of medical facility, and you might be mid procedure, I don't know what that means, but you might be, it might be important that you can have enough light to be able to finish what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up, because when you're looking at schemes, say if it's not just a responsible person of an existing building, say it's a new build or something like that, and you've got to consider all these areas. So you've got to consider the type of scheme it's going to be, or the type of system you're going to have. Are people going to vacate that area when you lose power to those luminaires? We're aware in 5266 introduced the new category, emergency safety lighting for people who might not want to evacuate immediately from the loss of power. So you mentioned care homes and things like that. They may be in a safe area, and actually evacuating an area immediately might not be the safest course of action at that time. So you won't know that until you have consultation, until you speak to people who are using that area and that space to say, how would you do this? How would you evacuate? when would you want to warn people to evacuate if you have got a loss of power? Looking at a design on a drawing and just putting the dots where you need to put emergency luminaires and doing the calcs doesn't give you that information.
So okay, so let me put a scenario to you that I don't know what the rooms are doing.
Yeah.
But I know that some of those rooms are likely to need more illumination because of what's likely to be going on in there. Can we retrofit additional lighting, or can we adjust light levels to cope for things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing is, if you do a design and you think it's correct at that time, and then something comes up and says things have changed, we need to consider something else. In the majority of instances, you'll be able to retrofit. I'm trying to think of times when you might not be able to. So they'd be quite specific type systems. You know, there might be a system which is bespoke to some particular manufacturer and they don't do a particular luminaire, or it might be a central battery system where you've not considered additional capacity for future work. So there may be times where retrofit is difficult, but I'd say in the main, especially if you're looking at sort of self-contained luminaires and systems, if something is missed, you can always go back and rectify that. And even if it can't be part of, say, an automated system, at the end of the day, the automated systems are there just to make life easy for the maintenance teams to ensure compliance moving forward. But if off the back of that, you don't have compliant emergency lighting to protect life safety immediately, then put it in there. You know, don't have it as part of the system just yet. Connect that, you know, solve that problem next. The key bit is making sure you've got the right illumination in that area for people who need to be safe.
Oh, so that's because that's obviously that's the priority, isn't it?
That's the highest risk.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Hey,
that's why I would look at.
I think that's fantastic. I think that's the best 15 minutes I've spent for many months.
well, I hope it added value. Sometimes I find that I do just ramble, so hopefully it wasn't a
well, if that's rambling, I think we got somewhere pretty important.
Okay.
Well, Steve, we're going to carry these conversations on, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to do so.
I think they're fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose from my point of view, the takeaway would be is people do hide behind caveats on these designs because they don't have information, but try and be proactive and just ask those questions that might fill those empty boxes, that tick boxing exercise that you say. And of course, caveats are always going to be relevant because when you do a design, even with all the information and you pass that over, things might change tomorrow, next week, next month. So I understand there's caveats there, but let's not use them to hide behind. If you don't have the information, you know, pick up the phone and ask the question. Yeah. You know, it's life safety at the end of the day.
Here's the thing. Now, maybe this is a question best suited to my lawyer, but I'll ask you. If I'm a responsible person for a building and someone comes along with a caveated scheme and I accept it with those caveats, am I carrying the burden for a scheme that doesn't work?
That's a fantastic question, and I'm glad you've asked that, because the responsible person, if not competent themselves, can employ other competent people to do these works for them. But ultimately, it's the responsible person who is responsible for fire safety in that building, regardless of what other works people have done. You can't dissolve your responsibilities by asking other people to do certain tasks. You still have to hold that information. And I think the main reason why is because as a responsible person, you're supposed to have control over a certain area of a building or an entire premises. So I can do a risk assessment for you, do a design and say, without this information, this is the best I can do. They can't then just hide behind that because they can say, okay, well, you don't have that information. I need to get that information. Or it might be a case of you saying, you might do a survey of a site and say, this area is not compliant. And they say, well, it's all right, because I've paid for a survey, a risk assessment, and somebody's done it, tick the box, put it in a file. But that person who's competent, if they're not the responsible person, they can't affect change on that site. Only the responsible person can. So they might have somebody else doing it, but if the responsible person doesn't take action and say, okay, I need to rectify that, and I forgot about the fire panel needing emergency lighting there, so I need to fix that. They can't just say, oh, well, I've got a survey, somebody else has done it, I've done a risk assessment, tick the box and file it. Somebody's got to act upon that, and the only person who can affect the change is the responsible person. So it has to come down to them to affect that change. So you can't hide behind the competent person, because you may have actions to undertake to become compliant in that particular area.
And let me say to anybody who's watching this, who falls into that role of responsible person, I think you've just been given some of the most vital information that you could possibly be given on this day. So, Steve, thank you very much for that.
No problem.
We'll speak again in a little while. To all those here watching and listening to this, I hope that's been valuable to you, and see you again soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you
Cheers.
very much. Cheers.